This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I speak with Arcual CEO Bernadine Bröcker Wieder. Formerly the founder and CEO of Vastari, a technology company that facilitated communication between museums and collectors, Bröcker Wieder is now recognized as a thought leader in the convergence of the art world and the blockchain. Her current company, Arcual, was founded by the MCH Group, the people behind Art Basel, along with the Luma Foundation and the venture arm of the Boston Consulting Group. Arcual is currently rolling out solutions that bring the power of the blockchain to traditional art world transactions, starting with primary market transactions for living artists. And now, a conversation about a blockchain built by the art world for the art world with Bernadine Bröcker Wieder. Bernadine Bröcker Wieder, thank you very much for joining me this week on the Art Sense podcast. Bernadine, you are the CEO of a new company called Arcual. A lot of times with folks, I like to kind of throw out a hypothetical, which is, say you're at a dinner party and you're sitting next to someone who has no idea who you are and has never heard of Arcual. Where do you start to explain to them what you do?
That's a brilliant question. And I would say that given Arcual only launched in December, it actually happens quite frequently.
Right.
So I have been working at the intersection of art and technology for the last 15 years, the last 10 of which I was running my own business called Vastari. Some people might recognize that. It's an online platform connecting museums with exhibition producers and collectors for temporary and touring exhibitions. But Arcual is a new company founded by Art Basel's parent company, MCH Group, together with a nonprofit called the Luma Foundation and a large corporate that people might recognize called Boston Consulting Group. Specifically, their arm focusing on digital ventures called BCGX. And usually those ingredients make people inspired and kind of interested in what we might be doing at Arcual.
How would you describe what your product offering actually is?
So we call ourselves the blockchain community created by the art community for the art community. And why is that relevant? If you look at a lot of what happened with NFTs and digital art and the crypto innovations of the last 3-4 years, a lot of it was using infrastructure created for cryptocurrencies and reappropriating it for the art industry. And what we're doing is specifically building tools that work in the way the art world works. And instead of reappropriating something that was built for cryptocurrency, building it not completely from scratch, but at least from the moment where it's necessary, rebuilding it to specifically work in the way that artists, galleries, collectors, and museums would want it to.
What did the founding group feel was deficient in the blockchain that needed to be improved to meet the needs of the art community? What was it specifically? Because I think on one hand, somebody could assume that maybe they just wanted to own that blockchain. Was there something about the nature of those cryptocurrency blockchains that didn't provide the capability for the robust features that were necessary for the art world?
Yeah, I think every technological innovation needs to be solving a problem. It can't just be technology for technology's sake. So in the case of the art industry and what we're trying to solve, I would say there are a few specific cases, but on a bigger level, it's about digitizing some of the art sales process. And why do you want that to be digitized, right? Why don't you just want to keep having paper invoices, receipts that are provided on paper or digitally, and kind of contracts that are on paper, and certificates of authenticity that are issued alongside the artwork on paper. why digitize them? And so I think the main problems we can solve by using these new types of technology is, firstly, you can have automatic payment terms. So if you're talking about an agreement between a gallery and an artist, you can make sure that they're both paid automatically whatever they're due according to what's agreed. We're starting with the primary market sale. So if you look at that, you've got an artist and a gallery saying 50-50 split, 60-40 split, whatever it is that they decide they're going to have in their consignment, that is automatically executed by a smart contract on the blockchain and documented in an immutable fashion. So you kind of don't have any confusion about that. And a really interesting part of that consignment agreement is also that you can set an expiration date, which in the art world, actually, a lot of people don't talk about when is that consignment kind of over. Mm-hmm. So that's one feature, the automatic payment split. Second thing is about resale royalty terms. So one thing that we saw with NFTs is that a lot of marketplaces implemented resale royalties for artists on secondary market sales. It's not a new concept. There have been a lot of initiatives, even dating back to the 80s in contemporary art, of believing that artists should get some percentage of future sales. In some countries, that's been codified into law. In some, it hasn't. But our system doesn't say that you have to have those resale royalties. It's just that it's possible. So an artist can define that together with their gallery and expect those resale royalties to come back. And with smart contracts, it can be that resale royalties go back to that originating wallet of the artist, but you can also build it to go to the first gallery that championed the artist or any other supporter. When we're talking about museums, could it be that they get a percentage of future sales for having commissioned work? So these are the kinds of things that are possible when you talk about digitizing those agreements. And then lastly, when it comes to the certificate of authenticity, this is a part that I find really interesting, having worked with museums for the last decade. When you digitize, you can add more information about the artwork. So we're not digitizing the artwork itself. That's what happened in the NFT space. It was kind of like you're linking to the actual digital asset. We're digitizing the documents around the artwork. And when you talk about contemporary art and its conservation, if you have a digital certificate of authenticity that can also include information about how it should be displayed, how it should be conserved, whether the artist is open to it being updated or not, where the artist wants it to be displayed. And even a new thing that was discussed last week was like whether you can include information about the sustainability of the materials that the artist is using. Those are all things that are possible when you have a digital certificate of authenticity compared to just a piece of paper.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, Bernadine.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you covered so much ground. I'd like to go back to the part where you were talking about how these blockchain transactions are able to trigger automatic disbursement at the time that there's a transaction. In my conversation with Robert Norton at Vastari, I was talking about how artists, I think, would love to live in a world where all they had to do was their craft, just not think about anything other than making. And I think one of the things that drives artists crazy is when a gallery does sell their work and it takes a lot of heavy moving and pushing to actually get the gallery to pay them their part of what was sold, right? And so it seems like from the artist's perspective, they would be excited about the opportunity of kind of an automatic transaction where that is automated, where no one is intentionally trying to play a cash flow game to slow pay them, right?
But the managing of cash flow is an integral part of running a gallery, right? And so we have to understand why that exists today. And also as Arcual, we are actually speaking to all of the galleries to find out kind of what are the problems that cause these delayed payments or issues. Can we solve for that too, right? Are there ways in which we can make sure that doesn't become an inconvenience to the gallery while conveniencing the artist? Also, I think every artist is different. You're right. A lot of them love focusing just on their craft. A lot of them are quite organized and follow up and document everything and are quite efficient in that way, or have studio managers that are on top of it. So I think the art world doesn't have one size fits all. You do have to kind of fix it. But you're right. A lot of, if we think about the stakeholders that are behind this, specifically, I'm thinking, for example, of Maya Hoffman from the Luma Foundation. She's all about the artists and ensuring that their best art is created. And if we look at what really can influence artists being able to produce, it's knowing that they have the money for the materials, that they actually continue to produce, and feeling certainty that they will get paid when the work is sold. Then there are other interesting benefits that if you have that payment going automatically to each party, then you have less complexities with tax for the gallery and all kinds of, we like getting into the boring stuff that might sometimes feel like a pain, but hopefully we can turn it into something much more easy and streamlined.
You were also talking about resale royalties. When I had Simon DePere on the podcast, we talked about how the middle market galleries are at a disadvantage because if they do their job well, they're going to find an artist that will leave for a bigger gallery just at the point that the work becomes more profitable, right? And it feels like Arcual provides a mechanism for that champion gallery, quote unquote, to be compensated for supporting that unknown artist before they become a big name, right?
Yes. I think if we look at the Art Basel specifically, which is, of course, the star of MCH Group, they champion taking care of that ecosystem of galleries, right? They even what they did at one point with the sliding scale of fees for fairs so that younger emerging galleries can afford to come. It's acknowledging that every kind of participant in the ecosystem is important and helps create these kind of positive network effects that create this beautiful thing that is the art world. And if you start having too much cannibalization, you can actually ruin that ecosystem, a bit like any type of natural environment, if you're thinking about kind of that balance. So the concept of resale royalties for galleries, it's a new concept, right? It's not been proven to help that ecosystem. However, I mean, for example, Tim Schneider from ArtNet, he talks a lot about how in other industries, such as sports and that type of thing, you do have support for those early supporters are somehow repaid for taking those risks. And we think that maybe our system of resale royalties could be used to help those people who take those risks early on in artists' careers. But again, it is still a hypothetical at this point because it's a new thing that we are championing. Another way in which those resale royalties for galleries are being used is actually different from supporting the ecosystem and more about almost like a form of enforcing some good behaviors. Specifically, our resale royalties can be customized so they, for example, expire at a certain date. So it could be that the champion gallery receives a resale royalty that's quite high for the first 2 years or first 3 years from that work selling. And if you do that, you kind of disincentivize people from selling it because a percentage will go back to that champion gallery and they'll get less of the share of the proceeds. So you could kind of, through the resale royalties, inspire people to act in a better way, like anti-flipping and anti that kind of, or if you are flipping, at least the champion gallery and the artist get a percentage, right? So I think that's a bit of that, of the concept of those resale royalties for champion galleries alongside the ecosystem. It's going to be interesting to see which of those becomes more popular in terms of the usage of those resale royalties for galleries.
You step back for a moment. You know, when I hear you describe how this company came together, I think it sounds like a really interesting story because, you have obviously MCH Group as the parent company of Art Basel. Luma Foundation seems to be looking out for the interests of artists. And then BCGX brings all of the kind of the technology and business acumen to the table. What I find really interesting and doesn't sound like other startup stories I hear is that these three came together to create this, and it's been a number of years. I mean, rarely do you hear a startup story where there's 3 years of development before launch, right? For most companies, it's a race to get to revenue, where Arcual's story sounds more like a race to get it right. Would you agree?
I agree with you. And I think coming in as CEO last April, that was very apparent. It was apparent that I was coming into almost like a testing ground within Boston Consulting Group, where this company had been incubated alongside galleries and artists specifically. And there were 30 BCG consultants working on this project. And I've actually worked to now hire the full-time team that's taken over from BCG. And there's 30 full-time Arcual employees now working on the project. And I would say that it's a responsibility to a certain extent, because you're not, you have to have the ability to innovate and to experiment and to do things, but you can't have the approach of moving fast and breaking things, which is usually the tech startup approach with like venture capital backing, etc. So it's proper research and development. That often that tech innovation gets grouped into this R&D category. This is proper R&D. It's listening for a long time. It's making sure that it's going right. And you could have people building it in a bubble, and as a result, you kind of don't have something that's valuable to the industry. But I was super pleasantly surprised when I joined that it was clear that this has been built by listening, by being responsive to what people say is valuable to them, and trying to be respectful, right? And it's interesting. When I was running my own company, it was always like when you take investment, there are strings attached to that investment usually.
Absolutely.
And especially when you're talking about venture capital, there's a certain return on investment within a certain period of time that's expected. And in this situation, you've got actually patient capital that understands that this has to be done right, that if you really want it to be an industry-wide adopted kind of set of technologies that are used, then you need to be patient and listen, and you could get it wrong, but then you have to iterate and keep adjusting and not give up. And I've said this before, but with blockchain, there have been a lot of really great initiatives, but never has a large organization properly put their neck on the line to say, we think this is the future. And here you've got major investment into like, this is the future. We have to upgrade our operating systems as an industry, and we're willing to help fund to make that happen.
When I hear you talk about the constituents that Arcual's built for, we talk about artists and galleries and collectors, and I just envision this Venn diagram, right? And we've kind of talked about the benefits for artists and galleries, but what are the benefits for collectors? How do collectors benefit from using Arcual?
I think that is a very important part, and that's a challenge, right? We have to build something that benefits all parties, not just one or the other. And for collectors specifically, it's interesting on a number of levels. So firstly, we are making it easy to pay for artworks. So you can just pay with a bank transfer. It's secure. You're not sending bank details over email. You're just doing it straight into the sales agreement that is sent to you. The next thing is that we are that digital certificate of authenticity that I mentioned. We're actually doing a lot of research with collectors about what they want to be in there. So we've had a collector in an interview a few weeks ago say, I like to have the artist take a selfie or like a selfie video where they describe to me what the work is and kind of tell me a little bit more about it so that I have that on file. You might have collectors that are interested in having this certificate of authenticity as kind of proof of purchase, that even if the gallery goes out of business, they still know that their artwork is legitimized and it's there. So yeah, and then there are the collectors that really love the fact that the artist gets paid immediately and understand that that is a really important thing, and so they want to use this new payment method to be able to know that the artist is getting their fair share immediately. So I think it depends on the type of collector you're looking at and what they're driven by. But in general, I would say there will be collectors that maybe are put off by it in some ways. And maybe those are also the collectors that don't benefit an artist's career that much, if that makes sense. So it might be the type of collectors that are a little bit more, what's the right word for it? A collector that's kind of taking advantage of their situation rather than really wanting to support the artist's career.
It sounds like you guys are starting with living artists on the primary market, and then we'll kind of expand out from there. Was that kind of a decision about what is the most common transaction, the biggest problem to solve, and then kind of move beyond that?
All tech products have to have an MVP, right? Like you can't solve all the problems in one go. So you're right. We did make a very conscious decision of what is that first step. It's got less to do with the size of the market for primary market sales or because of the specific problems we're solving. It was actually about where the authenticity of that transaction is the clearest. We are very focused on the information going into the blockchain being correct. That's why you cannot mint, an artist can't come onto Arcual and mint an artwork with a certificate of authenticity on their own. They have to be with a gallery. And that's in this first example for a primary market sale where they're consigning the work with a gallery for sale. That is so that you have a counter signatory to confirm, yes, this artwork exists, it's there, and I'm going to sell it. And then when a collector purchases it, you basically have three entities confirming that artwork exists and that it has transacted. So we will be expanding from that first example slowly and surely to other examples where we can have that same type of certainty that information is correct. So bit of a sneak preview on our roadmap, but our first next step is what we call secondary market for living artists. So having living artists verify works that have already been out and are being sold at a gallery again, so that the artist can sign off on that. And then you move towards secondary market for non-living artists. So that would be working with artist estates and more complicated authenticity issues. And then we'll go further and further into the secondary market as we expand. And simultaneously, we're also looking at other verification entities. So currently it's artists and galleries. It could be in the future artists and artist residencies. It could be artists and other forms of sales, whether it's not a gallery. We're slowly rolling it out with all of these entities to try and figure out how we make those transactions digitized, but make sure that the information is correct.
You use the term mint there.
Yes.
It begs the question of, I feel like this platform is built for leveraging blockchain technology to solve the problems of the traditional art world. But that space that's grown up around digital art and what we've been calling NFTs to this point, does that plug in just as easily as the traditional art?
A really good question. So I purposely used the verb mint there, and good on calling me out on it, because it's what people recognize when they think of NFTs, right? Like you mint an NFT and you have that certificate of authenticity, usually an ERC 721 within the Ethereum ecosystem or ERC 1155. It's kind of this verb for creating these tokens. We are compatible with that type of system of creating certificates of authenticity, but we've gone beyond it. Our team includes people who are very passionate about the public blockchain networks. So we're making sure that we're future proofing for however that evolves over time. So I still remember when the term NFT didn't exist, when ERC 721 was a standard for CryptoKitties. It's all a little bit, you never know where technology will go. So you have to be aware of the systems that are out there and make sure that you are interoperable and compatible, but also be very careful about when you want to connect with these things or not. So we very clearly ring-fenced what we're doing right now as being only for physical artworks, being sold at galleries and sold in non-cryptocurrency, so fiat currencies, etc. But we've left some, I guess you could say, some opportunities and potentials for the future, depending on where the market goes. So if cryptocurrencies become a common payment method within the art world, and you actually get people using, whether that's stable coins or government issued digital currencies or cryptocurrencies themselves for artwork payments, we are compatible with that. We just purposefully didn't build that yet because actually most artwork is still bought in dollars, pounds, Swiss francs, euros, whatever currency. Same with kind of that certificate and its compatibility with NFT certificates. It's our certificates cannot be sold on an NFT marketplace. We've done that on purpose because it's not an asset in itself. It represents the sale of a physical artwork. However, digitally and in terms of its kind of setup, it is compatible with those systems. So if you had places where you store that information, you would, in theory, be able to store our certificates as well. So it's a little bit, I hope I'm not getting too technical for people.
No, that's fine.
You said I was allowed to go a little bit deeper.
Well, they can always fast forward if they want it. You know, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. If it's getting too detailed, then but basically, I guess the bottom line is everything is thought through. We're thinking through everything and trying to make sure that we're making the right decisions. Or if we're not taking a decision, we're purposely not, and we're waiting to see where it goes.
You know, one of the defining features of those public blockchains is the transparency of the data. How would you define the transparency or opacity of the data on Arcual's blockchain?
That's another great question. I'm going to I'm so grateful because when you ask great questions, then I can give the answer because we've been thinking about it a lot. So we didn't use the public networks exactly because of that, because of the fact that it's maybe a bit too transparent for the art market right now to put all of their prices and everything on the blockchain that way. There are ways in which you can mask identities, wallet addresses, transaction amounts on public networks. But we found that the important thing for us is that it's private by default, but that you could make it visible over time. If you decide that you want to share that information, and also that you can verify that the information is correct. So our system is, by the way, if people don't want to listen right now, we will be publishing a white paper about that in a moment later this year, so that people can actually read up on exactly how we're approaching privacy and data issues. In summary, we basically ensure that the information is private, but that we are compatible with the public networks, and you could make it public if you want to.
It sounds like next steps beyond, living artists in the primary market, next steps, living artists in the secondary market, and then non-living artists in secondary market, which I guess it's a little bit more complex to try to pull together all of those genuine documents for those transactions, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about what's on the horizon for you guys, but maybe also, since, you've always been kind of at the crossroads of art and tech, helping organize things like the, Christie's Art and Tech symposiums. What do you see on the horizon for Arcual, the company, but also the nature of how the art world is evolving? What changes do you see ahead?
So again, really important is that we won't solve all the problems. A lot of when we look at our approach to secondary market, it is around partnerships and all of the different art and technology companies that are developing out there that are actually finding the excellent solutions to be able to solve some of those problems, whether that is solving issues of authenticity, of verified records of provenance, of verified transactions, and even linking that physical to digital asset. It's all about partnerships and ensuring that we have the same information. So I've personally been involved with a lot of cross-industry initiatives like the Art Identification Standard Consortium, and we're also in conversations with Art Ledger in the States, set up by Valence. A lot of what the future of technology is about is not just ring fencing like my data, your data, but actually working together, and we'll be stronger together rather than trying to do things in silos. So I think that is really our approach, and that's also the blockchain approach. So it would be a bit antithetical to be developing something on blockchain and not be expecting to collaborate. Which also leads to kind of our longer term vision, which is of not just partnering on an app level where we're developing applications together and developing new interfaces for users, but also on a data level, having additional entities come in and be validator nodes on our network and getting involved with that, the storage of the information, where currently it's our shareholders, MCH Group, Luma Foundation, and BCG that are involved with that. But that will also be part of the future. And we will be publishing more information on that in terms of the governance and the blockchain also later this year. So going back to your point of transparency earlier, you need to, in order to collaborate correctly, you need to be transparent yourself as a company about what you're planning, how you're developing things, how people can plug into it. So that's definitely what we're going to have within Arcual.
Bernadine, I really appreciate your time this morning, and I appreciate you being willing to open up and answer all my questions. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, I appreciate your patience with all of my techie explanations. Hopefully people found it interesting. And if they do want to get involved, you can, on our website, find out more about joining our community, whether that's signing up for our newsletter or setting up a demo with one of our team. We're really keen to speak to the industry. We're even holding a lot of calls with studio managers and galleries across the ecosystem, as well as collectors, to be able to ensure that our first products are really relevant to the way that they work. So thanks for giving us this opportunity to share with the industry.
That's all the time we have for this week. You've been listening to ArtSense. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And while you're there, please rate the show and leave a quick review. Your feedback is the key to other folks finding us. And if you'd like to see images related to the conversation, read the transcript, and find other bonus features, you can go to cambia.art and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at craig@cambia.art. Thanks for listening.